Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, 8 Things You Should Know Before Your Design Becomes Construction. So thank you to everyone for taking the time and joining us today. I'm Michelle, and I'm an executive assistant at TQ Construction. I am assisting Megan during this webinar. A few things to mention before we start. A recorded version of this webinar will be available in a follow-up email in the next day or two. To respect our presenter and any other attendees, we ask everyone to stay muted until the end of this webinar presentation, where we will have a Q&A at the end of today. We ask that you ask questions at that point, or if you have a question along the way, feel free to put that in the chat messaging box below, and we'll address it at the end. And so Megan will answer all those questions then. So I'm happy to introduce to you, Megan, our project relations and our host for tonight.
Thanks, Michelle. So as Michelle said, we're going to go over 8 things you should know before your design enters construction today. And so this is kind of the snapshot of what we'll be going over today. So we're going to be going over kind of what generally happens as you're preparing for your design, as you're kind of getting introduced to your design process, what your initial concepts might bring to the table, as well as concept budgeting that kind of goes hand in hand with each other. They kind of tie into each other. And then once you're kind of finished your design cycle and your scope confirmation, what that kind of looks like moving into, permitting and material selections, and then finally handing off the project into construction. So for your design preparation, so when we talk about design preparation, we're talking about kind of the pre-work that you need to have done in order to really start a design. Different companies have different ways of executing these tasks, but generally speaking, they're all kind of the same bits and pieces. So typically you'll do some sort of site measure, whether it's with a fancy camera or manually doing a site measure. Depending on your project type, you may need to do a land survey or a site plan. So for example, if you're doing some sort of addition to your home, or if you're building new, or if you are building a new structure on a property like a laneway house or a multiplex, you'll definitely need a laneway. You'll definitely need a land survey for those kinds of projects. If you're just doing an interior renovation, you might be able to get away with just like a site plan and how it all fits on the site to show the city that you're not doing anything outside of your existing building envelope. From that site measure that you do, you'll get existing as-built drawings. Again, this is kind of one of those, if it applies to your project, if you're doing a renovation, you need that site measure and those as-built drawings so that you can have a baseline of what you're working off of. If you're building a new structure, then you really just need that land survey with an idea of where your setbacks are, which comes from that municipal building bylaw zoning study, where you're looking at how much square footage you can put on a lot, how much densification you can get, such as like how many units you're allowed. If you're building like a multiplex, some plots of land allow you to have, say, 3 or 4, and then some will allow you to have, I believe, as many as 8, depending on how close you are to a major transit station. So all of those things are things that you determine from your zoning bylaw study, as well as things like how close can you build to your property line? How far back do you need to be built from your front yard and your rear yard? Can your upper story be the same size as your main story? Are you allowed a basement? How deep does the basement need to be in order to be considered a basement? And these are all things that your design team will help you figure out, will study on your behalf and present to you and help you figure out what the best path forward is for your design, depending on, what problems you come to your design team with for solutions, because that's what your design team is doing. They're figuring out solutions to your problems. And then, yeah, just kind of looking at the site in general for site requirements and conditions. So that would be things like, the, the geological sort of how the ground is on that site, whether we anticipate needing to remove a lot of earth and then, bring back in a lot of earth if it's on a hill. If there's an area in Vancouver that's kind of like in the northeast chunk it's on technically a marsh, I believe. So like getting structural landing and footing in that area is actually really difficult, and you have to go pile down quite far. So all of those kinds of things go into site requirements and conditions, and what that might also impact your project. Other things might be like what era the home is from, and therefore what building materials were likely used, because that would affect our anticipation of hazardous materials and what we would expect to see in our hazmat report, which we do have to do on every single project, because you need one of those to disperse of things at your local facility. So once you kind of have done all of that prep work, you move into your design introduction. So really what that is, meeting and greeting your design team, which is, it's as much as shaking everybody's hand and getting to know each other a little bit, as well as kind of setting your parameters as you go through and doing, walking through your project, whether it's conversationally or physically walking through a project, as well as if you have a collection of inspirational photos, or if, for example, if you're building a house brand new, but kind of more or less like you have a really clear inspiration, and being able to show that to your designers. So those are all kind of things that would contribute to a project walkthrough. And then kind of also usually a designer would still want to walk through the space that you're in currently to kind of identify things that you do and do not like. So in some homes, it might be, I really love my walk-in shower. Like we want to build our dream home. I love our current walk-in shower. We'd like to replicate that somehow. Or, I really hate that I can't get into the back corners of all my kitchen cabinets. So that's something that I really like to address in our new design. And so those are all kinds of things that you want to start identifying at the beginning of the process. And it's really an ongoing thing. It's not something that just like, it's a one and done situation. You go through your initial walkthrough and there's no other opportunity. It's not like that at all. You have continuous opportunity through the process. This is just really jumping off from a starting point and doing an initial gathering of information to have something to work off of and determining what your wants and needs are. So I always make a point of really encouraging my clients to identify the difference between wants and needs, and identifying what are the things that you really need to get out of your project in order for it to feel like it was a success and worth your time and energy. And then also identifying the things that you would really want in your project, if at all possible, because that also helps the design team when they're going through and doing different concepts to be able to incorporate different aspects with different levels of priority, depending on what's possible, sometimes physically, sometimes financially possible on a project. So to make sure that we understand what those desires are as early as possible is very, very helpful. And then from that point of, all that initial information gathering and setting up that initial file, we move into our initial concepts. So typically for your initial concepts, you'll see multiple versions of the same area where your design team has taken different aspects or different elements and combined them either in different ways, or they've swapped out different things for different priorities, depending on like possibly all the things that you wanted couldn't necessarily fit in the configuration that you had initially envisioned and still have a reasonable amount of space for things. Like one that I'll hear or see often is where people are like, okay, well, I want all of my bedrooms on one level, but I also want all of our bathrooms on one level. And I want them all on the upper story. But then we run into a situation where sometimes like the upper story is not allowed to be the same full square footage as the main story. So then we quickly run into a situation with the design team where they're solving the problem of how do we meet the needs of the most amount of needs of the family. So, okay, so then it becomes a question of like, why do we want all of these bedrooms in one area? Is there a reason? Is there one that could be moved down to a main level, or is there another way we could solve this need or this want? And then from that, you'll also see like floor plans and elevations depending on your project. So you'll see floor plans which will show different configurations of how things could be laid out. And then you might also see, elevations that would show if especially if you're doing like a new home or an addition, of how things would look from the outside and appeal from like a street view or from a sectional view, so that you can kind of get an idea, not just in terms of like floor plans spatially, but also how does that work in the vertical. And then once you're kind of looking at all of those different solutions and all of those different options, then we really want to hear your feedback, because it becomes a bit of a jigsaw puzzle in terms of, I really liked how you laid out this bathroom. Could we move that bathroom into this floor plan? Could we move the bathroom from, concept D into concept B? And can we take the kitchen elements from concept C and move those over? And so it's really very important to receive very honest feedback, including things that you don't like. So it's equally as important to hear about things that you do like as well as things that you don't like. And I always stress that, because people don't have an issue with pointing out things that they really like, but they sometimes feel uncomfortable pointing out things that they don't like. But that feedback is equally as important for your design team, because if you don't like something in your home, that's just not the goal. So if you really love something, let us know. If you really don't like something, also let us know, so that we can find a way to fix it and improve it and not include that in ongoing concepts. And then from that point, we also start working on corresponding budgets that go along with that. So your concept budgeting really dives into it. So when you initially engage with your designer or your design build team, you might have talked about a general approximate number or ballpark figures for your project. It might have been like a 1 or 2 pager describing like a scope of work, and this is what we think that it could possibly potentially end up being. And at this stage, you're really starting to dive into it and look at, lines upon lines. Like here, you can see that there's pages and pages of detail. There's line items and line items of detail. It goes into, what exactly it is, the quantity of it, whether it's square feet or whether there's like, 3 sinks or whatever that looks like, right into very detailed costing. And so that allows for several different things. It allows you to kind of get an idea of, overall project cost, but then it also gives you the opportunity to see a couple of different breakdowns. It gives you the opportunity to see what work is required in order to accomplish your project that you may not have been aware of. It also allows you to see scopes of work that are a part of your project that may not be optional. They may be required for whatever the reason is. It might be required by the municipality. It might be required from a structural perspective, but it really kind of allows you to kind of see all of the different pieces of scopes of work and why those scopes of work will be there, as well as the anticipated costs. Because it's very, very rare that a project comes up and goes through completely from beginning to end without cost being a conversation at all. So it gives you a chance to see what the permitting process will likely look like. It gives you a chance to see what the construction process will look like. And it'll also give you the opportunity to kind of see where some of your material allowances might be looking like as well. And it gives you the opportunity to see what different specialty scopes of work might come out with as well. Like, oh, I didn't realize that my fireplace with the custom surround was going to come out at a certain amount. And so it allows people to kind of look at both aspects of, all the things that would be nice to have, and then the corresponding value of that. And it really helps people prioritize what they want out of a project as they're trying to move forward in order to make it viable. Because at the end of the day, if it's not viable, the project doesn't happen. And that just is sad for everybody. We want the project to happen. We want everyone to have their dream homes at the end of the day. So then basically at that point, you go through a design cycle where you're rotating through and you're meeting with your design team and kind of going through your different concepts. Usually it gets whittled down pretty quickly. Like your first meeting is where you deal with the most number of concepts, you deal with the most different versions of things. And then you go, okay, I like A, B, and C. Let's see if we can combine them into one concept. Then you come back into your second meeting, and it's really down to like the last kind of details of figuring out the back and forth of it for the most part. And along with the budgeting as well, it's the same thing of, reviewing it, seeing the changes and how those are reflected in the budget, and what kind of things that we need to change in order to kind of move the project as a whole towards that point where we're ready to move into our next phase. So once we've finalized our concept design and our construction budget reflects the scope that we're wanting to include in said concept, and we've made sure that construction is indeed feasible. We've done a walkthrough with our construction team. We've made sure that everybody's on the same page. Everything is indeed doable. We've checked with the structural engineer. They've given us a thumbs up and a go ahead. At that point, it's really time to start looking at what the next stages are. So it's really starting to get ready to submit for all of our permits with the city, whatever that might look like, as well as making all of your material finish selections. So for permitting and approvals, that's really a lot of behind the scenes work that as a client you may not see as much of. So sometimes there's a bit of a like, hey guys, what's going on? And we just have to update you like every couple of weeks and let you know what's going on in terms of, hey, we're getting all of these reports. We're waiting to hear from the structural engineer. We're waiting to hear from the arborist, the energy report, the hazmat, which is the hazardous materials report. As well as any other reports that we need to get in order to submit to the municipality. Every municipality has different requirements. Vancouver and Burnaby are not the same as North Vancouver, as New West. Everybody has their own set of requirements depending on how much information that they want and how they run things like the utilities and things like that. We would get you to fill out the city forms so that we can apply for a permit on your behalf and start getting the process going. And then once everything is ready, like all the permit sets are ready to go and all of that, we would start submitting for the permit. So once we've submitted for the permit, there's a bit of a waiting period. And again, this is not something that we have control over. We don't have control over how long a municipality takes to process a permit. It also depends on which permits your project needs. You may need a development permit and a building permit, in which case the project, the process of the project might take a little bit longer, just because they have to go through and process that extra piece of documentation. Whereas if you're just getting a building permit, it might be a little bit more straightforward and you're just going through and getting that one bit of approval. Yeah, and while we're doing that, we're communicating with the city as regularly as we can. And then as we're kind of, getting feedback from the city, making the appropriate adjustments and sending them back said adjustments, we get to a point where the city's like, yep, okay, we're ready, stamp of approval. And then we have to get all of our city deposits in order Again, that really depends on the project. If you're doing a full new build or a large addition, you're gonna probably be looking at some engineering deposits with the city. If you need to do like a water service upgrade to your property, they take a few deposits. They'll take some, usually they take a landscaping deposit of some kind. And then the idea is that usually most of that you get back at the end of your project, unless some of those deposits are used for completing work by the city through the process. And then once all of your deposits are paid and ready to go, you receive your permit and you're set to start work, which is very exciting. And then while all of that is happening, because it takes a while, because again, we don't control how long the city takes, we do our material selections. So we don't want to just be sitting around doing nothing while the city is processing everything and looking everything over. So what we do through that process is we start our material selections, and it's basically the shopping process for your renovation or your new home. So going through and reviewing different material samples in your home, your design team will want you to look at things in your home so that you can see what it looks like in your home's light. So you can take it into different rooms and take a look at it. If you're doing a new home, they'll still bring it to you, especially if you're rebuilding in the same location, because the sun will still be the same and you can kind of take it into different areas and take a look. They'll want you to visit showrooms for anything from appliances, tubs, sinks, light fixtures. One of our designers is really adamant that when you're getting a bathtub, that you go and you sit in the bathtub for, I forget how much time, but she recommends that you like pick out a portion of your day or a serious bit of time, and you actually sit in bathtubs that look appealing to you, because the whole idea of a bathtub is that, you spend like 20 minutes to an hour in them, right? So you want to make sure that not only do they look pretty, but that they are also functional and comfortable to use. And then also things like light fixtures, where they're not as easy to bring into the home when you're looking at multiples. So you're really going into a store and looking at all of your different options. And your design team will go with you and help you look at different things, get you in touch with the appropriate store rep, so that you can kind of get a good idea of what would work best in what you're looking for in your project. And then also, as you're going through and looking at different things, your design team will want you to consider different features. So again, kind of going back to those things that might bug you about your home or things that you really like about your home, going into features like the type of, shower head that you have, or pull-ups that you have in your kitchen that make your life easier. Other things might be like, lights that turn on automatically on your stairs so that you can see when you're going up and down them in the middle of the night and you don't have to light up the whole house. So those are other things that are good to consider as you go through and think about, because it's easiest to add them in when all of that big work is happening. And then as you kind of get closer and you're getting more of your colors and your design finishes and your flooring and all of those things picked out, you'll kind of get a chance to see some material boards. They may not necessarily be in like a material board setting, but the idea is that you'll see a presentation of a bunch of different textures and colors and materials together so that you can see what they look like all together rather than separately, because something might really appeal to you in and of itself. But then when you put it next to, say, 3 or 4 other things that you really like, they may or may not all go together, in which case it might make more sense to go with another product if that's the case, or swapping out one of the other items if you're really attached to your flooring, for example. And then also getting to see like 2D and 3D space renders so that you can kind of get an idea of like how the colors will go together in the room. Will it look too washed out? Is it just the right amount of pop of color? How it will kind of look spatially in the room. Will there be enough room to walk between the island and the kitchen counter? Will there be enough room to walk around the bed in the bedroom if it's got like a real sized queen or king size bed? So those are all things that are really valuable to have a clear understanding of, obviously before it becomes construction and starts actually getting laid out and finished up into place. So that's really your whole design process. Once you've got all your material selections, you're ready to hand off into construction. And so that's our day today. Does anybody have any questions? No? I can't see if there's any questions in the chat or not.
No, it doesn't seem like any
That's okay.
questions. Mm-hmm. So that basically wraps up today's webinar, right?
Yeah, that wraps us up today. So our next webinar will be on Wednesday, September 18th. Again, it's 6:30. If you want to speak to us before then, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to chat with you on the phone or go back and forth with a couple emails, set up a time to come visit you, whatever your preference is. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the fall, in September.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.